Episode 3 Shadows at Low Tide. 1. Storm's Aftermath. Lightning flashed through the night, tracing its jagged path across the sky before vanishing into the roiling darkness. The storm battered Westvale until the early morning hours, rain lashing rooftops and churning the harbour into a seething expanse of whitecaps. By dawn, the worst had passed, leaving the town glistening and dripping in the wan glow of a cloud-wrapped sun. Detective Rowan Byrne rose from a restless sleep in his small room at Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house. His dreams had been troubled. Images of hooded figures and swirling runes danced behind his eyelids. The threatening note he'd found pinned to the door last night hadn't helped. Now he hurriedly dressed and checked the locked suitcase under his bed. Inside it rested the iron casket presumably tied to Captain Hawksmoor's legend. It was still there, untouched. He locked the suitcase again and exhaled with relief. Good. No one had broken in overnight. He thought of Cassia Morell staying in her modest motel on the edge of town. Was she safe? He'd offered her the boarding house's spare room for extra security, but she'd demurred, wanting to keep her own space. Byrne resolved to check on her as soon as possible. They had more research to do, and quickly. A soft tap sounded on his door. When he opened it, Mrs. Sweeney stood on the threshold. She looked more anxious than usual. "Detective, I'm sorry to disturb you, but the local radio station reported a body found near the docks at dawn," she said, voice trembling. "They haven't released details, but folks are whispering it might be a fisherman or something else." Byrne felt a chill tighten around his chest. A body. In a small town like Westvale, that was a big deal, and with everything else going on, his instincts told him it wasn't just an accident. "Thanks for telling me," he said, shrugging into his coat. "I'll head there now." 2nd. Grim discovery by the docks. The morning breeze carried the tang of sea salt mixed with the pungent odor of algae. Huddled near a slipway on the far side of the pier, a half-dozen onlookers stood in wary silence, their faces etched with concern. Police tape stretched between rusting metal posts, forming a barrier around the crime scene. Officer Hannah Gonzalez met Byrne at the edge of the taped-off area. She looked grim. "We got the call at first light. A fisherman spotted him floating near the pylon. The victim is a local named Avery Collins, retired sailor, well-liked in town. He's been dead a few hours, maybe since last night." Byrne stepped closer, careful not to disturb the scene. Collins' body lay partially covered with a sheet. The man's greying hair was plastered to his skull, and his hands were contorted as if he'd fought for breath. There was bruising along his jaw and neck, as if from a struggle. "Any sign of foul play?" Byrne asked quietly. Gonzalez pulled back the sheet just enough to reveal dark marks on the man's wrists. "Ligature wounds, and we found something odd on his palm, carved or scratched in." She lifted the hand, showing a faint symbol etched into the skin, likely with a sharp blade. A stylized wave crest coiled like a serpent devouring its tail. Byrne's stomach lurched. He recognized it as the same symbol on last night's threatening note. Gonzalez lowered the sheet again. "The coroner's en route, but it looks like homicide. Maybe he was drowned, or his neck was broken first. The symbol suggests a message or a warning." Byrne clenched his jaw. "I've seen that symbol recently," he murmured, mindful of the onlookers. "We need to keep the details quiet, or the killer might vanish into the fog." Gonzalez nodded in agreement. She seemed rattled. "I'll handle crowd control and keep the press at bay. You do what you need to do, detective." Byrne thanked her and headed away from the crowd, noticing Cassia standing at the perimeter, hugging a shawl around her shoulders. When she saw him, her expression was a mixture of dread and determination. "What happened?" she asked in a hushed tone. "Rumors are going around that a man was killed." He nodded, voice low. "Victim is Avery Collins, possibly murdered. He had the same symbol we found on that warning note." Cassia paled. "That can't be a coincidence. Someone is sending a brutal message." They exchanged a silent look. The stakes had just risen from theft and vandalism to murder. The clock was ticking faster now. 3. The Scholar's Revelation. In the wake of this grim discovery, Dr. Sebastian Harland, maritime historian and archaeologist, arranged to meet Cassia and Byron at the Westvale Public Library. He arrived just after they left the docks, wearing a rumpled overcoat and looking shaken by the news of Collins's death. "I heard about the murder," Harland said, voice subdued. "Terrible. Let's hope it's not connected to everything else." But there was little doubt it was. Eliza Marlowe, the librarian, guided them into the archives room with drawn blinds and hushed urgency. Once they were seated around a large wooden table, she passed Dr. Harland a folder of runic references. "Here's what I've managed to decode so far. I used partial translations from older maritime ciphers that Cassia discovered. It seems that multiple fragments, scattered across Westvale's relics, collectively form coordinates or instructions." Harland donned his reading glasses, scanning the cryptic symbols. "I see a repeated phrase about 2 keys and a sunken cradle. We suspected that referred to the cargo's watery grave. If these scraps are combined, they might pinpoint exactly where the cargo rests, whether along the coast or further out at sea." Cassia leaned forward. "Eliza, have you come across the wave serpent symbol in any local texts? The one we saw on that note, also carved into the victim's hand." Eliza shook her head. "Nothing definitive. It resembles certain older designs referencing the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its tail, but it's stylized to look like a wave crest, possibly some secret society symbol or a cultish maritime group that once existed here. We do have records of older sea cults rumored in coastal towns centuries ago. Some believed in protecting cursed cargo from leaving the ocean's depths." Harland rubbed his temples. "I've encountered rumors in maritime lore, a clandestine group called the Order of the Deep Tide that guarded relics deemed too dangerous for the surface world, but most historians dismiss it as myth." A tense silence followed. Then Byron spoke. "If it's real, maybe they're the ones behind the threats. And now a murder. Their mission could be preventing anyone from retrieving Hawksmoor's cargo. They might see it as blasphemy or something too deadly to unearth." Cassia felt a shiver of unease. "Which means they'll do anything to stop us, or to ensure the relics are never reunited. Or worse, if some renegade faction within that group wants the cargo for themselves." The hush in the archives room was so profound that they could hear the ticking of the library's grandfather clock in the hall. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows. 4. A desperate confession. As they stepped out of the library into the mid-morning gloom, their nerves were on edge. The clouds overhead pressed low, suffocating the day in a steely grey blanket. Cassia and Byron both jumped when they heard quick footsteps behind them. "Wait!" a voice called. They turned to see Mr. Finch, the anxious antiques dealer, hurrying up the sidewalk. He looked even more distraught than usual, his eyes bloodshot. "Mr. Finch, are you all right?" Cassia asked. He tugged them aside into a recessed doorway, away from prying eyes. His voice trembled. I heard about poor Avery Collins, and I received another letter this morning, someone threatening me if I don't turn over any other Hawksmoor relics." Byron's expression darkened. "Did it have that wave serpent symbol?" Finch nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes. I swear, I don't have anything else except what I gave you. But there is something I never told you. My grandfather used to keep a log of all the antiques he handled, including items passed down in our family. I dismissed it, but maybe it holds more clues." He fished a small leather-bound notebook from his pocket and pressed it into Byron's hands. "It's from the 1930s. My grandfather wrote about attempts to locate the matching key for that iron casket, the one I gave you. He believed it might be hidden in the catacombs beneath St. Felix Chapel." Cassia's eyes widened. "Catacombs? In Westvale?" Finch nodded hastily. It's an old, half-ruined chapel up the coast road near the cliffs, abandoned for decades, but rumor says there's a crypt underneath. My grandfather planned to search for the second key there, but he gave up after hearing strange rumors, spooky tales about robed figures, chanting. He said it wasn't worth angering them. Finch's face creased with fear. He died soon after, and no one followed up. A chill crawled up Byron's spine. Thank you for this, Finch. I know it can't be easy. Finch shook his head. If you find the second key, maybe you can end this madness. But be careful. Those people, they're dangerous. He hurried away, leaving Cassia and Byron to stare after him. Within that battered leather notebook might lie instructions for accessing Saint, Felix Chapel's forgotten crypt, and, if Finch's grandfather was correct, the missing key. 5. Plans and Warnings. Back at Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house, Byron secured the door to his room and spread out Finch's grandfather's notebook on the small desk. Cassia stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. The old man's handwriting was neat but faded, describing genealogical lore, references to hidden compartments, local rumors. Halfway in, they found a passage. The second key is rumored, kept by those who vow to protect the chest's secret. They gather beneath St. Felix Chapel, away from prying eyes. My attempts to enter were met with warnings and a faint chanting echoing in the stone halls. I dared not go further. Another page referenced a stone effigy in the chapel's crypt, said to hold a locked box in its mouth or clasped hands. Details were unclear. The text ended abruptly with a note. Beware the watchers in the dark. They bear the mark of the Serpent wave, sworn to keep the treasure buried at sea. Byron ran a hand through his hair. This lines up with the Order of the Deep Tide idea, or something like it. They might be hoarding the second key, ensuring no one unlocks Hawksmoor's cargo. Cassia's heart pounded. This is bigger and more dangerous than we imagined. They've killed once. They'll do it again if we trespass on their ground. Byron nodded gravely. But we can't let them remain the only ones who know the truth. If they have the second key, they might do something drastic, like destroy the casket or the relics to keep them hidden forever. Or maybe a rogue member wants the cargo for profit or power. Cassia studied his face. So we go to St. Felix Chapel and see for ourselves. He met her gaze. We can't rush in blind. Let's do some recon first. I'll inform Officer Gonzalez that we have a lead. Maybe we can get official backup if it's truly a crime scene. Cassia frowned. But if local law enforcement is outmatched, or if someone on the inside is compromised, we risk losing the element of surprise. They debated the risks, finally deciding to go covertly that evening, just the two of them, and possibly Dr. Harland, if he was willing. The chapel was rumored to be half-collapsed and dangerous. Under cover of night, they'd have a better chance to slip in unnoticed. Although that prospect sent a chill through both of them, they saw no other way to break this deadlock. 6. The Chapel on the Cliffs. Twilight found Cassia, Byron, and Dr. Harland driving an old jeep up a winding coastal road beyond Westvale's outskirts. The sky was a deepening blue, scattered with ragged clouds. The sea crashed against the base of the cliffs far below, visible through breaks in the stunted pine trees lining the road. Dr. Harland had balked at first, calling this plan potentially reckless, but Cassia and Byron's earnest urgency had convinced him. Now, as they rounded a bend, they saw it. A crumbling stone chapel perched near the cliff edge, its peaked roof half caved in. A rusted iron gate barred a weed-choked courtyard. Wind whipped across the open land, carrying the tang of salt and the faint screech of gulls. They parked behind a stand of trees, dousing the headlights to avoid announcing their presence. Armed only with flashlights and cautious resolve, they approached the gate. Harland peered through the iron bars. Looks deserted, for now. Byron tested the gate. The lock was old and rusted. He forced it gently, then gave a sharp push. With a reluctant squeal of metal, the gate popped open. The trio exchanged uneasy glances and slipped inside. The chapel's front doors were heavy oak, warped by years of neglect. One door hung ajar, revealing a dim interior that smelled of mould and wet stone. Inside, scattered shards of coloured glass crunched underfoot, remnants of stained glass windows. A few pews lay overturned, rotting in the damp. The roof vault overhead was partially collapsed, allowing a slice of moonlight to fall across the broken floor. Cassia's flashlight played over the walls, revealing faded murals of saints and angels, some defaced by graffiti. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of centuries pressing in. "We should look for a stairwell or trapdoor," she whispered. "Something leading below." 7. Descent into darkness. They spread out carefully. Harland examined the stone pillars, searching for hidden latches or recesses. Byron swept his flashlight across the floor, noticing old, worn tiles with large cracks. Cassia found a side chapel behind a tattered curtain where a battered altar rested atop a raised dais. A dark opening yawned beneath the altar, an old crypt entrance possibly. Carefully, she called the others over. "I think I've found something." Byron knelt, shining his light into the gap. Slick steps of ancient stone led downward, disappearing into blackness. A rush of cold, dank air rose up, carrying the scent of damp earth. Harlan's voice trembled with mixed excitement and fear. This must be it. The crypt. Possibly where they kept the remains of old priests, or maybe even that effigy Finch's grandfather mentioned. They steeled themselves, then began to descend. The steps were narrow, forcing them to proceed single file. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming puddles on the slick stone. Halfway down, they heard something, faint chanting, echoing from below. Byron froze, heart pounding. He turned off his flashlight, gesturing for the others to do the same. The darkness was absolute, but their ears picked up the rhythmic murmur of multiple voices. Could it be members of the so-called order? Cassia's mouth went dry. Her mind flashed to Avery Collins's body and the cryptic warnings. She pressed closer to Byron, who took a cautious step forward, letting the faint glow of distant candlelight guide them. At the bottom of the stairs, a corridor stretched out, carved from the bedrock. Cracked stone arches lined the way, each revealing small niches that once held tombs. Shadows flickered on the walls, cast by an unseen flame. The chanting grew louder, a low, droning incantation. The trio crept forward, hugging the damp walls. After a short distance, the corridor opened into a subterranean chamber. The scene they beheld made their blood run cold. 8. The secret ritual. A half-dozen robed figures stood in a semicircle, candles burning in tall iron holders behind them. Their hoods concealed their faces. At the center of the chamber lay a stone effigy of a medieval knight or monk, hands clasped over its breast. Carvings on the effigy's chest showed a wave serpent symbol, exactly like the mark they'd seen on the dead man's palm. One robed figure stepped forward, chanting in a guttural tone. Though the words were unintelligible from this distance, they sounded ancient, layered with menace. Another figure held something in their hands, a small object glinting in the candlelight. Cassia stifled a gasp. The object looked like a key, its bow shaped like a serpent's head. Harland tensed beside her. Byron clenched his jaw, taking in the presence of so many unknown adversaries. He counted 6, possibly more in the shadows. Storming in unarmed would be suicide. Then, as if sensing watchers, one robed figure turned abruptly. "Who goes there?" a sharp voice demanded, echoing off the walls. The chanting cut off. Byron cursed under his breath. They'd been spotted. He grabbed Cassia's hand and urged her back into the corridor. Harland, eyes wide, followed. They sprinted for the stairs, footsteps echoing. Behind them, shouts rang out. The flicker of candlelight approached as robed figures gave chase. 9. A narrow escape. Cassia's heart thundered in her chest as she scrambled up the slippery steps. She could hear the thud of boots behind them. Halfway up, Harland stumbled. Byrne grasped his arm, pulling him upright just in time. They burst into the ruined chapel, where moonlight spilled through the collapsed roof. One robed pursuer emerged from the stairwell. Even in the half-light, Byrne could make out a glint of steel, a knife or short blade. No time to reason or talk. He scooped up a broken wooden beam from the floor, brandishing it like a club. "Stay back," he warned, voice echoing in the cavernous space. The robed figure hesitated. More silhouettes crowded behind him in the stairwell mouth. Then, from somewhere deeper in the crypt, a stern voice called, "Let them go! We have what we need." At that, the robed pursuer snarled, but stepped aside. Cassia, Byrne, and Harland wasted no time. They darted past, out the chapel's front door, and into the night. In the courtyard, they sprinted for the jeep, hearts pounding. No one followed. Only the wind sighed through the rusted gate. Once safely inside the vehicle, they sat breathless, pulses hammering. "They let us escape," Harland said in disbelief, wiping cold sweat from his brow. "Why?" Byrne cranked the engine, casting a wary glance back at the chapel's silhouette. Maybe because they already performed their ritual, or they didn't want to risk a more public fight. Either way, we got out with our skins intact. Cassia inhaled shakily. "But we saw the key, right? One of them held it in the circle." Byrne nodded. "That has to be the second key for the casket. They must keep it in that crypt, performing some ritual to guard or use it." Harland rubbed his temples. "Now they know we're onto them. They won't hesitate to strike again. We need a new plan, and maybe more allies. We can't just waltz back in there." A long silence fell. Then Byrne pressed the gas, guiding the jeep onto the moonlit coast road back to Westvale. They'd discovered the location of the second key and confirmed the existence of a secretive, dangerous cult, but they were no closer to obtaining that key themselves. Meanwhile, a murderer was at large, and the cargo's final whereabouts remained elusive. 10. Conflicts of the Heart. An hour later, they regrouped at Cassia's motel room. Tension hung thick in the small space. Harland paced near the door, adjusting his glasses repeatedly. Byrne stood by the window, scanning for movement outside. Cassia sat on the edge of the bed, eyes on the floor. Finally, Harland broke the silence. "I can reach out to a colleague who specializes in maritime cult lore, though I doubt he'll have time to come here. Still, maybe he can confirm the Order's rituals or give us insight." Byrne rubbed the back of his neck, exhaustion etched on his features. "That might help, but everything points to that group wanting Hawksmoor's cargo to remain hidden forever. They have the second key. If we can't get it, we might never open the casket." Cassia looked up, her voice trembling slightly. What if we use a locksmith or some specialized tool to open the casket anyway? We risk damaging whatever's inside, but maybe we don't have a choice." Byrne considered it. "We could try, but if the contents are ancient documents or a fragile relic, we might destroy them. That might hand victory to the cult. Nobody learns the truth." Harland frowned. "We should weigh that risk carefully. If the casket's contents are the final step in locating the cargo, we want them intact. If the cargo is truly cursed or dangerous, knowledge might be the only way to handle it properly." The discussion waned, and a heaviness settled over them. Cassia placed a hand on Byrne's arm. "Rowan, we're in over our heads. There's a murderous cult, stolen relics, and now we have evidence they're performing some kind of ritual with that second key. I'm scared." Byrne's expression softened. He gently squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out, even if it means calling in more official help." Harland quietly excused himself, stepping into the motel's hallway to make phone calls, leaving Cassia and Byrne alone. For a moment, they simply stood there, the unspoken tension between them an odd mix of fear, camaraderie, and something else, an empathy forged in danger. 11th. A ransacked library. Later that night, while Byrne and Cassia tried to get some rest, Harland taking the motel's adjacent room, a sudden call on Byrne's phone jolted them awake. It was Eliza Marlowe, the librarian. She sounded frantic. "Detective Byrne," she gasped. "The library. It was broken into just now. I was working late in the archives. Someone in a hood forced the door, started rummaging for the documents we'd been translating." Byrne was already pulling on his shoes. "Are you safe? Did they hurt you?" "I'm shaken, but unharmed," Eliza said, voice trembling. "They locked me in a closet, but I managed to call for help on my cell. He took some of our papers. I think it was more of those coded fragments." "Stay where you are, Eliza. I'm on my way." Cassia, hearing the conversation, shot to her feet. Within minutes, she, Byrne, and Harland were in the jeep, racing through the fog-laden streets. The library lights glowed ominously against the mist as they pulled up to see the door broken. 2 local officers, called by Eliza, were already there, securing the scene. Eliza emerged from behind a bookshelf, pale and shaking. Cassia embraced her gently. "Oh, God, Eliza, are you okay?" She nodded, eyes darting around. "He had a hood, just like you described. He took any documents referencing the runic symbols and maritime ciphers. I tried to stop him, but he shoved me aside." Byrne's jaw tightened. "Did you see his face?" Eliza shook her head. "No, it was too dark. But he kept muttering something about ensuring nothing is revealed, like he had a mission to destroy all evidence." Harlan surveyed the wrecked archives room, noticing scattered papers. "So they're cutting off our ability to decode the final puzzle. If they have the second key already, the only advantage we had was knowledge." Cassia's eyes burned with frustration. "We still have Finch's old notebook and the partial references Eliza made, but the cult has ramped up their efforts. They'll try to eliminate every clue or person who might decipher the runes." The officers took statements and dusted for prints, though Byrne suspected they'd find none. The intruder, likely a cult member, was cunning enough to wear gloves. All signs pointed to the same Wave Serpent group, bent on preserving secrecy. As they departed the library near dawn, Cassia felt a grim determination take hold. "We can't just play defense, waiting for them to pick us off or steal more relics. We must find a way to get that key, or open the casket another way. If they realize we still have Finch's notebook, we'll be next." Byrne stared at the swirling fog, the first hints of morning light starting to glow. "They've declared war on information. We need to strike back with it, but we can't do this alone." Inside, each of them knew a confrontation was coming, one they might not all survive. 12. The next step. After ensuring Eliza got home safely, the trio returned to the boarding house for a quick meeting. Mrs. Sweeney, worried sick, fussed over them with tea and biscuits. They sat around the small dining table, the aroma of lemon polish and fresh bread doing little to ease the tension. Byrne pored over Finch's grandfather's notes again, scanning for any hint that might help them infiltrate the crypt or seize the second key. One passage leapt out. "Upon the tomb, effigy rests the mouth of secrets. Some say if you speak the vow of the sea and place the key at the effigy's lips, a hidden compartment opens. Another key was said to be hidden behind the stone's clasped hands." Cassia tapped the page. "So if we'd had time, maybe we could have found a hidden compartment in that effigy. But the robed figures were already there, performing their ritual." Harlan considered this. They must have used that hidden lock to retrieve the second key from the effigy. That's what we saw. Byrne's phone buzzed. He answered wearily. Officer Gonzalez on the other end, wanting an update. He gave her a sanitized version. The same group behind the previous thefts had stolen important historical documents and might be involved in Avery Collins's murder. She promised to intensify patrols, but also urged caution. Without hard evidence, the police couldn't raid the chapel. "Not without probable cause and a warrant," Byrne said after he hung up. "Time-consuming. The cult will vanish by then. taking their key with them. Cassia's eyes flicked to the locked suitcase under Bayern's bed. We have the casket. They have the key. If we're going to decipher this puzzle, maybe it's time we consider more extreme measures, prying it open. Harlan nodded reluctantly. If we do, we should consult a conservation expert, or at least a skilled locksmith who understands antique mechanisms. Otherwise, one wrong move, and we shred centuries-old parchment or break a delicate relic. Byrne looked at the two of them, seeing the fatigue and resolve in their eyes. "All right," he said softly. "We'll find a discreet professional who can attempt it. We can't wait any longer." A silence fell, each person steeling themselves for the next step. This was a turning point. Opening the casket without the rightful key might be irreversible. It could either unravel the final piece of Hawksmoor's mystery or destroy it forever. And with a lethal cult shadowing their every move, there might be no second chance. 13. The Dawn of Uncertainty. Outside, dawn lightened the sky to a washed-out grey. Seagulls drifted over the rooftops, keening softly. The world looked the same as it ever was, yet everything had changed overnight. A murder, a near confrontation in a hidden crypt, a ransacked library. Westvale felt dangerously small, as though the swirling fog concealed watchers at every corner. Cassia gazed through the dining room window. Her reflection stared back, weary yet determined. She thought of Captain Hawksmoor's final voyage, the rumoured curse, and what might be inside that iron casket. What if the cargo truly was something monstrous or cursed? The cult's zeal suggested they believed so. Bayern placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll see this through," he said, voice low. "No matter what's inside that casket, the truth needs to come out." She nodded, placing her hand over his. "I'm with you." Nearby, Dr. Harlan cleared his throat. "Then let's proceed. First, we find a safe place to attempt the casket's opening. We keep what we learn secret from all but those we trust completely, or we risk another theft. Then, if the contents confirm a location for the cargo, we decide how to handle it. Turn it over to authorities, or, if it's truly dangerous, keep it hidden or destroyed." They agreed. Gathering their notes, they rose from the table. Mrs. Sweeney hovered anxiously in the hallway, offering her best wishes. The hush in the house was thick with apprehension. All the while, Westvale's damp streets awaited them beyond the front door. The threat was real, pressing in from all sides. Yet a flicker of hope burned in their hearts. They'd survived the crypt. They still had a path forward. Perhaps the casket's secrets would break the stalemate, giving them the knowledge to face this cult head-on. Little did they know that, in the coming hours, startling discoveries and treachery would collide, pushing them closer to the heart of a centuries-old mystery than they'd ever dreamed possible. And somewhere in the gloom, unseen eyes waited, ready to strike again as soon as the time was right. Looking ahead. As night turns to day in Westvale, our protagonists find themselves caught in a tightening net. They've glimpsed a secret cult performing a ritual in the chapel's crypt, discovered that cult members now have the second key, and have proven their capacity for deadly force. Meanwhile, stolen documents and the ransacking of the library threaten to erase vital clues. The only way forward might be to force open the iron casket, risking irreparable damage to its ancient secrets. In Episode 4, expect deeper betrayals, daring decisions, and surprising revelations about Captain Hawksmoor's cursed cargo. Our protagonists will try to open the casket, and what they learn inside may shake their resolve and drive them into confrontations they aren't certain to survive. Stay tuned,